From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. A Louisiana man faces charges for swimming in a sporting goods store fish tank. We'll ask Jacob all about his experience coming up. And now, broadcasting from the Turn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Jacob, do they hit you harder for the repeat offender thing? Is it
No.
second charge on this one,
they're
right?
very understanding.
Well, I mean, if they're just going to keep that lid open like that,
Yep.
they're inviting
Got to
it.
be a Bass Pro Shop.
It was. Nailed it.
Has to be.
Yep. It sure was.
Because they have those
Yeah.
huge fish tanks in there that are open top.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Yep.
That's so funny.
Yeah, the video is pretty funny.
That's great.
So this dude just dove in there?
Yeah, Bossier City, Louisiana?
Yeah.
Bossier.
Bossier City,
Yeah.
Louisiana.
Idiot.
Yeah.
Don't know how to pronounce that.
Kevin Wise, 26.
It does look like Bossier.
Yeah, it does.
The
Bossier.
spelling is Bossier.
I believe it's pronounced Boucher.
Well, it's like the parish that I grew up in because we didn't have counties.
That's what
We
a
have-
parish is?
We have they're just counties.
Oh, okay.
It's exactly like a county.
Okay.
Spelled Ouachita.
O'Shea?
Ouachita.
Oh, shit.
Any guesses?
Oh, shit.
Okay,
Oh,
what?
shit.
I gotta spell this.
O-A.
Ouachita.
Oh,
C-H-I-T-A.
oh, it's shitta. Oh, it's
Oh,
shitta.
shit.
Oh, shitta. That's what it is.
Oh,
Oh, shitta.
I'm
I just had to
guessing
spell it out to make sure I was spelling it right out loud.
Oh, shitta?
But I'm right, yeah.
Oh, shitta.
OSHA.
Ouachita.
Okay.
Oshia. Oshia.
No, you got to get that T in there.
No, I think the T is silent.
I'm
I
going
think
with
everything.
Oshida final
I think
answer.
everything after the C is silent.
The T.
I think it's O.
The T is not silent.
Okay.
All right.
Ochita.
Actually, the last syllable is the only syllable that makes any sense. Washita.
Oh, shut up. That's ridiculous.
It sounds like it's spelled Washitah.
Charleston.
And you know what? I think this just proves that when you make a mistake, you just stick with it.
Just stick it.
And,
That's
and
right.
you
Like no, that word
that's-
spells Washita.
No,
I
it
spelled
really
it
doesn't
right.
look like. Yeah, well, you're an idiot.
No, I spelled it right.
You don't know how French works.
We're ready to open schools again.
I believe it's Native
Sir,
American.
we're canceling the legislature because we're scared of the virus. No. Schools are opening. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, that's one of the things about Nevada that's hilarious. Our government only convenes once every 2 years, and they only convene for 120 days to do the people's business. They've convened an emergency session to deal with this corona thing. It started 2 days ago. They have already canceled it because somebody in the legislature has the virus.
Yeah.
So they shut the whole thing down. And everybody's like, hey, assholes, remember how you're going to open schools in 100 or like 30 days?
Yeah.
You
and
guys
they
will
said-
cancel the session?
I heard recently, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they said that kids are least likely to get problems from it.
Yeah.
That's
But,
true.
Yes, but then I was thinking,
Yes,
yeah,
I
but
believe-
they still
statistically
pass it
true.
on.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's like
And
that still
also,
doesn't make sense.
teachers are people. They have lungs.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. They live. They have to
unproven.
work there.
Unproven.
They
That's-
have lungs.
Hey, please state opinion when you're giving an opinion, okay?
All right. I want to spell the name of a town that I lived at in Texas, and I want to see if either of you can pronounce it.
Oh, this is a fun game.
You're gonna have
Let's
to-
just do this today.
Shit, he got it. It was hard to figure out. All right. You're gonna have to type it out or
I'm
write
typing
it
it
out
out.
because you're gonna need. Okay, so it is spelled Waxahaccee.
I need you to spell it again.
Waxaha. Hold on.
No.
Yeah. Waxahacccie.
Waxahachie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Waxahachie.
Okay, that was pretty easy.
Shut up.
You mean just like it's spelled? I'm going to type out my hometown.
Oh, Jesus.
See if you can pronounce this.
Iowa.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's a state, but
Iowa
good
City.
enough. Yes.
Iowa City, Iowa. Did I
It's
get
pronounced City.
One that we've talked about
idiot.
it. We have talked about it on Ice Cream Social, but the city that I went to college in
Yeah.
Natchitoches.
Yeah, Natchez, right?
No,
No.
Nantucket.
closer. Natchitoches.
Oh,
Oh,
Natchitoches. Yes,
jeez.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, but this is how I feel
Natchitoches.
about Louisville. Like that, it's Louisville, but Louisville. You're supposed to like pretend like you don't speak English when you say that name.
Well,
You
there
gotta rest the lips.
was
Louisville.
never Louis. It was Louis.
Louisville, but still Louisville. Call it that, but Louisville.
Well, that is how it was pronounced. Like
Louisville.
Louisiana
Oh.
is.
That's a guy's name.
Yeah.
It's a guy.
It's the king
Specifically
of
a king.
France.
Wow.
King of France.
Wow.
Louisiana.
So his last name was Anna.
It was Siena.
Ah. God, it all makes so much sense now.
Louisiana.
Yeah. Just call it. What do you want to call this place? Just name it after Louis. All right.
Okay.
Tangmania. That'd be a good name for a place.
It would.
Tangmania. Jobinia. That'd be good. I think Smith is pretty
Smithsburg.
Smithsburg. There's probably a few Smithsburgs.
It's gotta be.
Jacobsvilles, things
Yeah.
like that. Jacob's Ladder. That's the thing. It's a biblical reference. So
anyway.
all this witty banter that the three of us have, man, it's really fun, isn't it?
Hello.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy all of our banter. I enjoy all of our BS. Also, before I read this first letter, Nick got me a gift. Yeah,
good.
for all of you that think that the whole bit between Nick and I, where I secretly adore him and he sort of doesn't have time for me, this gift, I think, disproves that theory. Okay? Nick does a pretty good... It's only for the show that he pretends to not be into me. But the truth is, he buys me gifts, okay? Does your boyfriend buy you gifts? If not, my boyfriend's better.
I mean, technically it was free. It was given to me, but
It was a gift.
Yeah.
Don't play it down. You're
Okay.
a sweetheart. You don't have to. You don't have to tell the people. Matte molding clay. He got me. Stronghold with low shine.
yes.
Truman's Barbershop style, Las Vegas. Everybody should go do all their barbershopping at Truman's
Smell it.
Barbershop. No, I'm not. Is this anthrax? God damn it, Nick. This is the third time.
Does this smell like chloroform to you?
Does it smell like chloroform?
No. Smell it.
I have a mask on, dummy.
You can just
And
figure
it's-
it out.
Okay, I'm unscrewing. And that smells nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Smells
Kind
like
of a
clean-
cinnamony,
Yeah.
nutmeggy type.
I'm gonna put. Can I make tea out of this? Can I use this? Can I use this stuff?
I
for
don't
tea?
see why you can't.
So we have a letter that asks about some of our fun dynamic here, and so it says, "Sup, Pod Therapy. Congrats, your social media advertising strategy worked because I just started listening to your podcast on the regular when I saw your AMA off of Reddit. I am in love because I am on my own journey to finding my first ever therapist. At first, I was a bit put off by all the banter that you guys did at the beginning of and through the episode, but I got used to it. I hope I don't offend you or anyone, but speaking from my own experience of working in the creative advertising design field, the banter really reminded me of white bro culture that I feel alien to, but have to deal with anyway because we live in a white society. I have grown to love the podcast despite this, but whenever I have shared it to my friends, who tend to be a little bit more artsy side like me, they have all commented on the same thing. This interaction has made me really think about who I want my first therapist to be. I'm an Asian American man, and I've struggled with fitting in growing up with a different value system from my immigrant parents versus what I experienced growing up in the American school and work system of Texas. I know people of color are underrepresented in the highest levels of therapy. It has been obvious since I've actually been having a hard time finding someone like me in Texas. I feel like it would be hard to relate to a therapist that isn't similar to me, since a lot of my struggles are from people not being able to understand me and where I came from. I guess my question is a two-parter. How important is it to find a therapist similar to you? And if you can't, how do you approach those clients who are of a different race and cultural background than you? Thank you, and please, 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 pick me, Andrew.
That's a good question, bro.
Oh,
That's a solid question, bro.
That's solid.
oh, we did pick you.
You know why we picked you? Because that's a good question. Good job, bro.
Way to go, bro.
All right.
Dude, bro.
Bro.
Bro, dude.
So that's Jacob.
That's Jacob.
What you want is a therapist like me, bro.
Get you a life coach, Andrew.
Yeah, get you a life coach.
What you want to do?
Get you somebody who's not licensed at all.
Yeah, from Louisiana in an unpronounceable place who just recently went swimming with the fishes. That's who you're looking for.
So these are really good questions.
They are. And observations.
And observations. Let's tackle the observation first.
I'm going to have a really hard time just not calling you bro the entire time.
Dude.
Okay. So,
first off, did you assume our race? No.
I mean, if you did, safe assumption.
You nailed
it. But, so here's the thing about this, because I've this has been kind of an internal battle for me since we started this podcast.
Yeah.
Because our whole purpose behind starting this podcast was because we wanted to make therapy something that we can talk about as average people.
Right.
For us to do this, we need to be average people.
Right.
There's this thing that I like to call on stage versus backstage.
Right.
Right. And who we present ourselves when we're on stage versus who we truly are when we're backstage. I think for most of the people who do a podcast, outside of this studio,
this studio's the exception.
This is definitely an exception.
Sorry, bro, I wasn't listening.
And then just hear like the pop of a can of beer.
I think most podcast hosts realize that they're on stage when they're doing their podcast.
Yeah.
Because that kind of fits with their profession.
Yes.
That's what they're doing.
Yes.
Right? For us, this is backwards because this is not my profession.
Right.
This is not my job.
The podcast
my job
is not your job.
Exactly. My job when I'm doing therapy or when I was doing clinical work,
right,
that's my on stage. And that's when I have to, I got to be professional.
Right.
When I'm doing my current job in my current role, I'm professional.
Right.
And I got to snap into it and I got to, put on a good face, a good front, right?
Well, yeah, it's a persona that goes along with it.
So what you see with this, or what you hear with this podcast, is this is who we just are.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, I don't change. I act the same way outside of the studio as I do in the studio. I'm just kind of relaxed.
I will say that is true of you. I don't think that's true of me.
No?
Not precisely. Podcast Jim is a little bit more trying to be entertaining than regular Jim. Like if we just go to Applebee's. Yeah, was I not nailing it this whole time?
Holy shit. I'd hate to see you not try.
Yeah, so I think that I feel more pressure in the podcast to try to, be engaging and, whatever. We try to be upbeat. And it's an attitude we try to bring to the show because the show has a design. It has a format. If you listen to your morning zoo, on your commute to work, you're not listening to the host talk about how rough their breakup was or something like that. Like, no, they're upbeat and they're fun and they're inspiring and they're bringing you little tidbits of what's trending today and getting your mind moving a little bit. And then it's like playful banter. And that's the format of the show. And in this show, I think our format is we deal with very difficult, morose questions often, and sometimes they're not, but they're real life, and we do not censor our questions. We rarely edit them, and like they
if
can
we
be
do,
about,
it's for time.
If it's that's it. And we still preserve the content. We take on some really complicated, difficult things that require ultra sensitive responses, and as professional as we can muster. And I think that if that's something you're trying to do, it's very easy for your format to slip into this, let's err on the side of being sanitized and as like clean cut as we can possibly be, and let's just be our therapeutic selves while we're here. The problem with that, when we started the podcast, was we looked around and there were lots of people doing that, and we didn't want to listen to any of it. And we thought, you're only preaching to your own choir if that's all you're doing. You're not spreading this concept of mental health to those who do not already possess it, because you're not reaching across the aisle to anybody else. You're just speaking inside of the academy. You're speaking inside of the hospital. That's not attractive. And so we had looked in, and we talked about this on Reddit, but one of the things that inspired me when we created the format of the show was I really liked that show called Car Talk on NPR. And here are these guys, they went to MIT, they're actual engineers, they are really good at fixing cars. I don't know anything about cars. I'm not a manly man. I can barely change a tire. But I listened to that show.
For the patrons got to hear you talking about fishing.
Yeah.
So
no, they didn't. I was just talking to you guys.
That was before the show.
Patreon. Yeah, that was pre-Patreon. Yeah, I was terrified to catch a fish because I don't know what to do with one.
You intentionally sabotaged this fishing trip
I didn't
so that
put
you
a hook
wouldn't
on the
actually
line.
get
Yeah,
fish.
because I was scared. I was throwing a line with a sinker on it in the lake with no hook just to enjoy the appearance of fishing.
And I gotta
was
tell you,
scared to catch one.
I don't completely believe Jim when he says that he's not good at changing a tire.
Okay.
Because I believe the truth might be that he's unable to change a tire.
Not that he's underselling it.
I believe that it's
I think
worse.
he's overselling it by saying
that he's not good at it.
Listen, I'm telling you that more than once I have bookmarked
There's an
a video.
implication there that says that he is able to change a tire.
In my YouTube, I have an entire folder of videos in case, and one of them is how to change a tire because I don't trust myself to just remember how to do it. So I have a video that I will watch if I ever... Anyway, so I liked the show Car Talk because I don't know anything about cars, but I found myself enjoying the content. It was not intimidating to me, and usually I feel intimidated. You know, manly men know how to talk about cars. I don't know anything about cars. And here these guys were, and they were geniuses about cars. There was nobody that could match them pound for pound, but they never made you feel less than. And they had these thick Boston accents. They were unapologetically from that region, and they referenced it all the time. They made jokes about it all the time. They were constantly picking apart their own show in a playful way, like, why are people listening to this, and like teasing each other. And I found it self-effacing and flattering, and I enjoyed it. And I just felt like I could walk into that room, and I felt bonded. And to me, I always wanted to do that with mental health. And so the format of our show, I think, tempts me to do that. Like, I want us to be buddy-buddy and friendly. And a lot of our listeners, they say that, yeah, that's disarming. You know, like, it's funny because just a little while ago, somebody on Twitter tagged us, and because their friend had said, hey, man, what was that show you were telling me about with the therapists who were kind of funny? And like, that's a huge compliment. Call us kind of funny. That's a big deal.
Yes.
And one of our listeners tagged us, and then so I jumped on the thread and I was like, hey, what's up? And the person was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna listen to your show now. Like, thanks for responding. I was like, yeah, no problem. And like, that's exactly it. Like, somebody who never would have listened to a therapist otherwise found us tolerable. So
right.
That's my thought on that.
And if other people find us intolerable,
fair.
That's okay.
It's fair. But I think about that a lot, like white bro culture. You know, we've taken on, over the 3 years we were doing the show, we've taken on some tricky topics. Yeah. And you know, I feel like I've learned so much, you know, by the people that we've brought into our show that have had conversations with us. I've learned so much about transgender, you know, nomenclature and how powerful words are. And I've always asked, you know, for grace and generosity if I can't get those words right in the first try, but I really want to. You know, race, gender differences. The other day we did a show on mansplaining, and on our Patreon it was just filled with female listeners going, that's not what mansplaining is, you idiots. Yeah. And I was like, oh, thank you for helping me understand that.
Which is great. And I think like that's one of the great things about that I really enjoy about this show is that we can take that feedback. I think we can kind of initiate a conversation, but it also points out that therapists aren't perfect.
Right.
You know, we're just like everybody else, and
it's okay to teach us about you.
Yeah, we're perfectly fine with that.
And I think that segues well into the writer's question about
exactly.
So how do I think the writer identifies as Asian American and lives in Texas and says, hey, you know, my culture has always been a minority culture. I've had to assimilate. My parents are immigrants, you know, and so I've felt caught between worlds. You know, I've assimilated. My parents haven't, and so there's tension there of trying to deal with their culture. Then there's a tension of, you know, me not being part of the majority, you know, race or culture in Texas. You know, that's been difficult. And now here I am, a person who's willing to go see a therapist. Great job, writer. We're really thrilled to hear about that. But I get it, you know, looking around and saying it's hard to find somebody that looks like me or that, you know, comes from my background.
Yeah. So how important is that in therapy? I think ideally, here I'll answer this two ways. Number one,
first the right way.
Correct.
And then go right back to being wrong.
Is there a right though?
I mean, I don't want to break our streak now. We've been wrong long enough.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So first off, if you can find somebody of a similar culture, that's ideal.
I think it's ideal.
That would be great.
Yeah.
You know, because there are a lot of things that are different. You know, I'm not an expert on Asian culture, right? So if somebody came to me and wanted to, you know, express some frustration or to talk about some of the things that are going on within that culture, I'm not really going to be attuned to what's going on with that.
Right.
Okay. So if you can find somebody, that's great. However, the second piece is that as a white male, heterosexual, I am interested in learning about other cultures.
Sure.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that I would be unhelpful in a therapeutic situation.
Right.
You know, I think most...
I agree. That is not why you would be unhelpful.
Yes. I would be unhelpful.
Of the list.
That's
not one of them.
Yeah. I don't listen. I don't care.
I'm checking my phone most of the session. I have my headphones in.
We can go on and on.
I didn't show up.
But none of it has to do with me being white.
No.
But no, I do think, though, that, like, I would say most therapists, I think, have a pretty high degree of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And know and have a pretty good understanding of what they don't know and are fine admitting that they don't know.
Yes.
And are willing to learn. So I think in some sense that could be good to have a therapist that isn't very familiar with the culture, because it gives you the opportunity to teach it to somebody else. And by you having to explain it, it might help gain insight for you in understanding that culture and understanding how you navigate what's going on in your life.
So I know you have a second answer, but
that was it.
Oh, I like both of them.
Yeah.
I don't remember the first one. But no, that second part.
And that's why you're a terrible therapist.
That's the only reason, though. Nothing to do with the race. No, but that's a really interesting point. And I actually just had this happen this last week. So I have a patient who's Filipino, and he's very much explaining to me what it's like to be first-generation American. His parents immigrated, and to kind of deal with that cultural, transfixation when you're trying to deal with both of these. And it's interesting because as he's explaining the culture to me, a person who's not part of it, he finds a lot of clarity and insight because he's trying to explain unspoken rules that are unspoken. And then I ask a question, I'm like, but wait a minute, that doesn't seem like a good thing. And he's like, yeah, that's not a good thing. Mm-hmm. But that is the unspoken rule, and it's not just my house. And it's like, okay. And just because you're explaining something to an outsider sometimes, it can be an interesting dynamic, And I've also had another dynamic where I've had female patients or transgender patients who they pick me, and then in the intake they'll reveal to me that they've been really hurt, emotionally by people who look exactly like me. Mm-hmm. The white guy, with the beard thing in his 30s is an intimidating symbol to them sometimes. And I have asked once or twice, like, hey, there's a lot of therapists out there, and if you need some coaching or some help finding somebody that you think would be a better fit with, I am very happy to help you. I want you to feel safe. And what's been interesting is I've heard from them, no, I kind of picked you on purpose because I think I need to say some things to you, even though you didn't do anything to me. But I need to say some of this stuff to a guy that looks like you because I think I need to get some of this out, and it's actually really cathartic. And I've had that happen a lot where I'm like, okay, then that's okay. That's an exercise. We can do that. But sometimes there's power to that too.
I was going to say too, there's value in teaching someone else.
Yes. Especially from where you're from. Teaching somebody that's not part of your culture.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've had people write in. We had a letter a while back from an individual who's Indian American, and was very, very. The letter was very thick with cultural references and things that we didn't understand. But the person was trying to tell us, here's my problem. It was a relationship problem, and I can't deal with this because of how important this is in my culture. And at that point, we said, hey, this is definitely the kind of thing that we want you to find a therapist, ideally, who is from your culture because they understand the subtlety without you having to explain it. So I kind of come back to your first point, whichever, out of the number of points you've made, one of them I know was ideally it is nice to find if you can. But also we don't want that to be a reason that you don't start moving forward.
Yes. And that's not the most important thing to find in a therapist either. I think to me, and you guys chime in, but
vertical leap.
Exactly what I was going to say.
That's what you want.
Yeah. You don't want somebody who doesn't have ups.
If they're not slapping glass, that is not your therapist, okay?
You want someone that you can trust, and that you can sit and you can have a conversation with, and that you fully trust and you fully believe in, as you're having that moment with them. And I think that's probably the most important thing, at least to me. I mean, what do you guys think?
100%.
It's hard to know that before you go in.
It is. And a lot of times you don't even know that really within the first few minutes of meeting somebody. Like,
no, I mean, it's trial and error for sure.
Right. And Lori Gottlieb in her book.
Yes.
Maybe
you should talk
you should talk to somebody.
Yeah.
she actually talks about that, like when she met with her therapist.
Oh yeah.
And kind of it took a minute because this was not the type of person that she would picture as being her therapist.
Right.
And it took some time to kind of build that relationship. But ultimately, yeah, it has a lot to do with trust, has a lot to do with how open you feel like you can be.
Right.
And are you feeling heard? The best predictor of success in therapy is the relationship that the therapist and the client have.
Yeah, in my personal view, if I'm picking a therapist, for me, and it's very common, by the way, for therapists to work with their own therapist at some point in their career, just like a dentist goes to his own dentist. He can't fix his own cavities, it's sitting over the mirror.
Not with that attitude.
So, it's very common. But like, I know for me, and Nick, maybe you'll comment on this, I intentionally seek therapists that are not me. I don't want somebody who because I think for me, I tend to deflect with humor if I'm uncomfortable, and I don't want somebody that will enable me to do that. And if they're like jocular dude, that kind of like I could go get a bro. Yeah, like somebody I'd go get a beer with, that person I feel could be too easily tempted to just let me diffuse but with that. Whereas I'll intentionally choose a female therapist, usually of a different generation, and preferably, of an entirely different background, because I want them to like not let me do that. I want them to challenge me and ask me and treat me like a patient.
Yeah. If I were going to recommend a therapist for you,
okay, Oprah.
No, I would.
That's my go-to.
I would go through I would pick a female for you.
Okay,
and I would try to find who is the female most likely to be offended by everything Jim says.
That's not a good idea.
And I think that's the person that you need to go to.
I need to find Karen. Dr. Karen. I would like to speak to your manager. I'm the patient. Well, do you resonate with that? I mean, whenever you were doing your own search, did you find that mattered?
A little bit. I mean, the therapist that I worked with, she was awesome. She was, hard to describe. Like, she was easy to talk to, but like she wouldn't take everything so seriously. So she did kind of have a sense of humor, but I just felt like I kind of got a sense that I could say something and she understands,
right?
Or she could relate, or if she doesn't, she would ask an insightful question,
right?
And I'd be able to explain it in a way that she could.
Yeah.
Right. It's just kind of that kind of
the rapport
communication.
Was there. Yeah. Right. And that's ultimately the journey. But to the writer, I think that the two questions there are, first, is it super important to find somebody similar to you? And I think that there are advantages to that. But as you've also heard, sometimes there's disadvantages to that. Yeah. And sometimes it's okay to intentionally steer away from that. And then the second question is, and I think it's asking us, like, as clinicians, what's it like for us? Like, whenever we're working with somebody of a different, how do you approach these clients who are of a different race and cultural background than you? And I know for me, and I think most therapists do this, and Nick sort of alluded to this, I think we take a posture of curiosity.
Yes.
You are not the first Asian American patient that this therapist has ever seen. You're not the first person who's from an immigrant family that they've ever seen. You're going to say things that they have heard before in very complex interactions with patients who have revealed deep, dark secrets of their family. There are things you are going to say that sound extremely similar, and your therapist generally has an idea of that. And yet, they're not going to jump, the rail on that and just assume everything about you. They're going to let you explain it to them, because what the hell's the point of just pretending that they already know you when they don't? They're going to get to know you. So I take that posture. I take that posture of curiosity, even if this is, I've worked with Hawaiian people. There is a distinct Hawaiian culture. There is expectations in the Hawaiian, culture and family systems. And I've now come to understand that quite a bit more. But I still don't pretend like I was raised in Hawaii, right? But if a Hawaiian patient tells me, things are a little bit different in Hawaii, I'll say something like, I think I've heard of things like that before, but what was your experience? What did you notice? What do you mean by different? And then they begin explaining. And some of it I've heard before and some of it I haven't. But through that interaction, anything that I'm missing, you can generally help me understand. And sometimes the fact that I am an outsider brings better insight. So
absolutely.
I think that it can be helpful.
Yeah.
And if you're uncomfortable with me, that's okay. I want you to find what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to tolerate the A block to get to the good stuff.
Yeah. That's what this is all about.
I think that's where we're going with it.
But this is a really good question, Andrew. So
is.
thank you for writing in. Thank you for being a listener. We're glad to have you.
Thanks for putting up with us.
Yeah,
And thank you for sharing us with your friends.
Yeah.
That's the highest kind of compliment. And
Yeah.
Andrew's
well, they don't
friends,
like us, but
buy Andrew food. Send him something. He sent you a therapy podcast because he likes you. Andrew's a good person. You're lucky to have him as a friend.
At the end of the day, Andrew, don't let that stop you from seeing a therapist.
Yes.
If you're looking for a therapist but you can't find an Asian therapist that's going to fit well with you, don't get to a point where you're like, well, I guess I'll just wait on therapy.
Right.
Take a step. Try it out.
Yeah. But hey, man, keep listening to the show and make sure you come give us your money on patreon.com/therapy. That would be a great use of time.
I've never been called a bro before.
I haven't either.
Oh, that surprises me.
Really?
That does surprise me a little bit.
Really? Is it because of the polo with the popped collars that I'm wearing?
Yeah, that's not helping. Pink polo with the pop collar.
The high top
Kenny
sneakers.
Chesney
all the
hat that I'm wearing.
The pastels that you wear.
Whenever I think of bro, I always think of Kenny Chesney. I don't know why.
That's your
that's funny.
immediate bro go-to?
Yeah.
Oh, my
was
gosh.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
All right. So fair enough. Anyway, thank you for writing in, Andrew, and we'll try to decrease the white here. We'll try to what is it? Adjust the white balance.
I mean, this podcast definitely needs diversity.
I think it does.
Sounds good, bro.
This is why as soon as Laura's in the room, I'm like, sit down. Get on this microphone right now. For the love of God. Save us from ourselves. All right. Well, we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are discussing mental illness in age. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's THERAPRODUCER sponsor is Robert Brownie Jr. Mints. Today's trivia question in honor of Robert Brownie Jr. Mint is: if Jacob can paint a house in 5 hours and Jim can paint the same house in 3 hours, how long will it take them to paint the house together?
8 hours.
If you
And I'm probably not wrong.
No, you're definitely wrong.
Jacob, I spilled the paint again. What
You
do
said 5 hours and
what do I
3
do?
hours?
Yeah.
Jacob can do it in 5,
You think
Jim
that
can
I
do
would
it in 3.
accelerate your painting time?
Well, no, that's just nonsense.
If I was
One of us
with
has
you,
actually painted a house in this quarantine time.
you clearly fill water balloons with paint and throw them at the house. See, that's why your way takes so long. My way's faster.
I just figured you'd be sober, so I figured it would take less time.
Maybe. Yeah,
Hey,
that's a big
I
assumption.
paint better when I'm not sober.
My heart.
If you'd like to join Robert and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
So is it a math riddle? Or
yes,
okay.
it's a math question.
So
So it's a genuine
I'm going to
math
guess
question.
4 hours.
But why?
Wait, hold on.
So it would take me more if we did it together?
So if
Wouldn't
it takes
take
me
less?
5 hours, takes you 3 hours.
If you did it together, how long would it take?
Well, wouldn't it be half of 3 hours?
No, I'm thinking 4 hours because half of 5 hours is 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Then half of yours is 1.5 hours. So 2.5 plus
Oh.
1.5 is 4.
So the argument, okay.
That's the math that I'm showing.
Oh, no, I think you're right. Yeah, because whatever.
Nope.
Oh, I feel like he's right because if it took him 5 hours to do 100% of the house and he only has to do 50% of the house, at his speed, he's going to do it in 2.5 hours. Same thing for me. If I have
Right.
to do 100% of the house in 3 hours, now I'm doing 50%, it's going to take me an hour and a
No,
half.
there's
He's
an-
right.
No, there's an actual mathematical formula for
Okay,
this.
and what is it?
What is the math?
Hold on, I gotta look it up.
Oh, you're an idiot.
No, there is.
There
It's
is
gonna be
a
four.
math formula.
No,
It's
I
gonna be
just,
4.
You
No,
just explained it.
no. It could because it's
You gotta
I have to
divide by
remember-
the cosmological constant.
it's 5 times 3 over 5 plus 3. I
Hey,
believe.
Pod Therapy,
Or I
this
have it
is
backwards.
Zach, and I was wondering if you guys could talk about mental illness in the elderly compared to someone that's 18 to 30. I know younger people can have mental illness, but in the older people, is it 100% guaranteed that they'll have mental illness with onset of old age? My therapist and I have talked about how anxiety does not happen overnight. Is that the same for someone that is 95 years old? What is their mental state at that age? Are they more vulnerable to rapid onset mental illness? Do you think as humans live longer and longer, will technology and medicine be advanced that we could cut down on mental illness in older age? Thanks, Zach.
Did the question just refer to anyone over 30 as elderly?
I think so. I think that's how I think about it. I consider
Wow.
myself
All right.
elderly. I'm 1 foot in the grave.
I didn't listen to any of the rest of that question.
Yeah.
You just heard that.
Just the age demo. No, I think it's a good question in this sense. So what I kind of hear the impression of that question saying is, hey, I hear a lot about mental illness, right? And we think about it as taking a long time to onset sometimes. Like sometimes it's rapid, like I didn't have anxiety before last month and now all of a sudden I do and I'm dealing with it. And sometimes it's like this ongoing process that eventually becomes a problem. So the argument is, okay, people who have lived longer have had more ongoing processes. Are they more vulnerable to mental illness? Is that a thing? And also I think infused in that question too is oftentimes the appearance of mental illness at advanced age. So one day you'll get the call and they'll be like, hey, grandma has dementia, or Alzheimer's or something to that effect. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is happening to them. It's significant. And it feels like it just happened, like out of nowhere, even though it's this slowly developing disease. I think that here's what I like about the question. There is not enough conversation about generational mental health. And what's interesting, and a lot of people don't know this, and we've never really spoken about this, there's an entire speciality, actually, which I believe is called gerontology mental health.
Geriatric?
Right? That one. That one. What's gerontology?
Throwing.
I don't know what gerontology is.
It's
the
okay,
study
geriatrics.
of the study
that
of,
might be it. Yeah, the study of, whereas geriatrics is the practice of
the study of Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry's a good guy.
Yeah.
And Jerry doesn't get enough respect, but he cares about his family, and I feel like Rick just takes advantage, and that's not cool. Where were we at? Okay, so geriatric mental health is important, and a lot of therapists are now starting to train more in it because obviously we're having a larger portion of our population. They're reaching, different age groups here, and we want to make sure that we're training therapists to be sensitive to the needs and culture of that demographic and understanding their stages of life, and how to treat that. How you treat somebody who's 18 years old dealing with, trauma or anxiety is fundamentally going to be different than how you treat somebody who's 70 years old who's dealing with that. And I know for me as a clinician, I've had to be very aware, very self-aware that whenever I have a patient who, is 18 or something, let's say they're 20 years old and they're like, I have anxiety that I'm going to die, and they have health anxiety, and you're like, okay, great. Like, let's learn using logic, and let's use ration, and let's understand how to eliminate these cognitive distortions and ultimately bet on what's possible here and what's probable. But then whenever you're talking to somebody who's 70, 75 years old, and they're like, I feel despair and depression that I've reached this stage of my life, and it is a different kind of tone that you need to have with them, where you're not going to say, hey, your best days are ahead of you, don't worry about it, it's all going to be great. Like, you have to respect, where they're at and try to meet them where they're at, and there's a different kind of posturing that I think that goes along with that. Yeah. So it's a very different practice.
Definitely. I mean, I've had those experiences where, not so much lately, but early on, where I was working with a guy, and he's like, yeah, my grandson's about your age. And I was like, and that's when it hit me, like, how am I going to work with this guy?
Right.
Like, if he sees me as being his grandson's age.
Right. Do I have any credibility?
Yeah. Do I have any credibility with him? Or is this going to be a challenge, an obstacle going through? And that's always different, because, yeah, you're right. I mean, as much as we want to try to empathize and try to understand the person's position, we can't. I'm not going to understand what that's like to be 75 years old.
Right.
But I have to be open to that idea, that experience, and then just ask questions. A lot of the same way that we talked about with the first writer.
Right.
Being able to ask questions.
But be curious. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not aware of any higher rates of mental illness.
I don't know that I've seen any data on that
goes.
either. Like, obviously, a person at 30 years old is not at risk for Alzheimer's or dementia. It is
outside of those, specific, because those are specific.
Right. But I would say that we do see data that says geriatric depression is rapidly growing, and so that's a concept. So there are certain things that I think different demographics are more at risk for. But also, I think that people that are in advanced age, I don't count that as anybody over 30, by the way. I'm thinking more like, 65 plus. I think that people that are in that status, they also have formidable coping skills because whatever they've faced in life, they've managed it for decades.
Right.
And so they're not usually suddenly having a rapid onset of clinically significant amount of distress. In fact, any therapist that meets somebody who's 70 years old and tells them, hey, I'm having anxiety right now, they're going to say, how long has this been going on?
Right.
And if the person's like, I don't know, off and on throughout my whole life, the very next question is, how have you managed that in the past?
Right.
Because I'm going to fish for solutions and fish for your natural coping skills to see if I can form a new tool out of that because I assume you have them. Whereas if you're 22 years old and you've never gone through this and all of a sudden it's happened and it's like, oh, how long has this been going on? 2 or 3 years. How have you managed it? I haven't. Okay, like it's a different kind of animal.
Right.
So
I mean, I would say most of the issues addressing geriatric folks would be things like changes in lifestyle.
yes.
Right. So life events,
Yes.
you know, obviously dealing with death of friends,
Can be. Yeah. Health.
retirement.
Retirement, having your children be, older and into their own independence. Isolation and loneliness is one of the biggest threats that I've had with any patient who's, 70 years and older. And that's always part of my treatment plan with them, is making sure we're finding ways for them to socialize.
Yeah.
Because that is a big part. Like social isolation, isolated from their family, just feeling detached, feeling insignificant. And then that sort of, despair for the future kind of thing. So there's different risk factors for that demographic. I don't know, Ryder, that I think of them as being higher risk necessarily. I believe that the largest demographic of people who are currently in therapy, I believe I've seen a study on this, is people that are 30 to, or I think it's 25 to 55. Which, is the number one, like if you're in, then it pairs down into those ranges of like people in their 30s, people in their 40s. And like, I've seen some studies that talk about how often people are going, but also that doesn't necessarily mean that those humans are more at risk. It could mean that those humans are experiencing very dynamic life events. They're getting married, they're getting divorced, they're having children, they're getting fired, they're starting new jobs, they're moving across the country. Like they're in their earning years, and so like there's a lot of dynamics that are happening in their lives that can, be triggers for them. But also, they may need that for maintenance purposes too. So it's, I don't know that there's any data on that. But
yeah, I don't either.
But rapid onset mental health is something that sometimes happens. We bump into it. We didn't have anxiety before. Now we do. And we treat it. And as long as you address it and you just kind of stick to a maintenance plan, you generally bend the arc away from that. And your worst moments tend to be behind you. And then whenever the smoke alarms go off, you know how to turn them off.
Right.
And you just mitigate the challenges live. And that's the only way I know how to make it work long term.
Do you know any geriatric social workers?
That are practicing or that are special? So a specialist, somebody that that identifies as that? I know
that
they
would be
exist.
willing to come on this show.
Did you hear the first writer's question? I don't know,
because that would be an interesting conversation. Because that's an area I don't know a whole lot about. I would be interested in learning more about that.
Yeah. No, me too. I would really love to hear that speciality. Yeah. Ryder, you've inspired us. That'll be something that we do as a little bit of homework. Is fish around to see if we can find somebody that could bring some extra insight to
or that. If we have a listener that happens to specialize in that, write in, let us know.
Maybe Vince does.
Perhaps.
Yeah, Vince in Pennsylvania. Maybe he specializes in it. Who knows? Anyway, I think most of the therapists that listen to our show have left.
Potential.
I don't think many of them stuck around.
Yeah.
Anyway, good question. Thank you so much for writing in. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss misdiagnosis. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Kayla Lansbury. Today's second question in honor of TheraProducer Kayla is: a triangle has the following sides.
3. Nailed it. Done.
4 centimeters, 5 centimeters, and 5 centimeters. What kind of triangle is it?
Okay. 4 centimeters, 5 centimeters, and 5 centimeters.
Yes.
2 equal sides. It's a cute triangle. It's a cute triangle.
No.
Isosceles.
Did you get it?
Yep.
I feel like mine's also right.
You're just a cute therapist.
I'm an isosceles.
If you'd like to join Kayla Lansbury and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
So an isosceles triangle is the kind where it has less than 180
I don't know, Jim.
degrees.
I just Google this stuff and I put it. I don't know.
I guess they all have less than 180 degrees, don't they? That's probably...
No, they should all have 360.
Well, yeah, all the sides added together.
No. The angles.
What?
180 is what triangles
It's 180?
have.
Yeah,
Okay.
it can't be...
Because a right triangle has a 90-degree angle.
Oh,
yeah.
I was thinking of 2 triangles.
You're thinking of it as a square.
That's called a square.
or a rectangle.
I was thinking one of those triangles with the round sides.
Could be a trapezoid too.
Kind of orbital.
I was thinking of a rhombus.
Oh yeah, that one. So wait a minute. The isosceles. What about an obtuse triangle? Isn't that?
No, you're thinking the angles. An
Yeah.
angle is acute if it's less than 90 degrees.
Okay.
An angle is obtuse if it's greater than 90 degrees.
Okay. So, but the kind
But
of
that's
triangle,
not the name of the triangle.
So there's an equilateral triangle.
Yes.
That's
Good.
when all of them are the same. And an isosceles triangle is one where.
Two sides are the same.
Oh, interesting.
I think.
I don't
No,
know the
equilateral would be three sides that are all the same.
That's what
what he said.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
then you're right.
So, but your example was two
Two
corners
sides.
are the same.
No, two sides are the same.
Oh,
Two
two
sides are the
sides.
same length. I think you're confusing that with two angles are the same.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is exactly what's happening here because that's an equilateral Lateral doesn't mean angles. That would be. All right. Let's all take a minute. Let's all Google this. Let's leave the listeners in about 5 minutes of silence. We'll all do our math. It'll be like that scene in Apollo 13 where everybody's like,
It checks out.
Checks out. We're good, Deke.
I've watched that movie like 3 times in the last week. It's just been on TV. I don't know.
Oh,
why.
that's one of my favorite
I love
movies.
that movie.
I
It's
know,
a good
rewatch
movie.
that too. Go, Deke.
I almost bought Apple TV last night.
Oh.
The service, not the.
Okay.
I have the device, but I almost bought the service last night because Tom Hanks. There's a movie called Greyhound
Okay.
that they've just released only on Apple TV that's starring Tom Hanks. That's
Wow.
a war movie.
Almost signed up for it just for that one movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
I might still.
You can't just order that one movie on any of your other systems?
It seems to be exclusive on Apple TV.
Oh, wow. I haven't heard. Greyhound.
Yeah.
I'll check that
I
out.
like a lot of his stuff.
I generally like Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
So, have you ever seen the bits where they take lines from his other movies and they infuse them into Toy Story?
No.
That's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Just all these bits of Woody, like just saying horrific things.
Like Philadelphia.
Yes, they immediately pulled from Philadelphia,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
just have him like talking to Buzz and like saying these horrific things. And just like, yeah, that's a great way to scar kids. Pod Therapy Guys. After a string of misconstrued encounters and emails with my psychiatrist, he misdiagnosed me. Of course, he did not talk to me about this diagnosis, and I stumbled on it when looking at my chart. I asked this doctor to reconsider the diagnosis. He said it was very well thought out, my med records are permanently skewed, and my treatment plan is not valid. I did switch shrinks, but it takes 6 to 8 weeks to see another doctor. Most psychiatrists avoid labels. This was just a total mismatch. Unfortunately, many docs hate to be questioned. It is my contention that this was retributional. As you know, it's a federal offense to alter medical records. Wait, it is? Oh, crap, Nick. How deep are we, man? You burned all those, right?
Yeah, they were fun.
Okay. I filed a formal amendment to change my medical records because it will be filed into my records that I dissent. You guessed the outcome. The doctor declined the request to amend them. As I said, I am in queue to see a new doctor who can change my diagnosis. Anyway, this is absurd and I don't meet the criteria. What do you pod therapy fellas think? Shay.
So, I was looking at this. Is this a follow-up to a previous email?
I don't know. I think we've had an email from Shay before. I don't know if that's the same Shay.
Okay.
Yeah. But so I mean,
Because I feel like we've kind of talked about a situation, about a diagnosis, but that may have been a different email.
we've talked a lot of diagnoses
Yeah,
lately.
anyway. I guess it is a show about mental health.
Yeah. Well, apparently it's about geometry now.
Okay, so one question that I would want to know, Shay, is, okay, so there's a diagnosis made. You disagree with that diagnosis.
Right.
The doctor doesn't want to change it.
Yeah.
That can be frustrating.
Yeah.
I definitely understand that. I get that. The question though is, to what degree does this impact your life currently? At the end of the day, I think that's really what this boils down to.
Yeah.
You know, because I get it. Like there's times where maybe a diagnosis that's in a medical record might prevent something happening in the future if you're trying to work for the government or something like that. Maybe that's the case. I mean, depending on how they have to, guard those records legally.
Right.
But I'm just wondering, is it just about I don't like this diagnosis and the doctor and I disagree? If it's just that, but then at the end of the day, it's not really affecting
real life.
What you do throughout the day. Is it affecting you emotionally? Is it affecting behaviors? Is it affecting like real life scenarios, like I mentioned, like getting a job? So to what degree is this affecting your life? That's for me. That's where I would start.
My assumption is there's some kind of real life effect here.
I would think so.
I think we have to assume
because I don't think, and it also sounds like it's not just a disagreement over diagnosis. It sounds like there was some miscommunication that led to what Shay believes is a misdiagnosis.
Passed back and forth, and also Shay believes that the psychiatrist. I mean, it's hard for me to say. I think a doctor would diagnose you to punish you. Like it seems that that's in the letter too. Like I think that this was what was the word that was used?
Oh yeah, I assume that's not the case. I assume this is not malicious.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Now the other thing too is if this is an issue of communication, who would the doctor be communicating with to misdiagnose?
Well, Shay, and I think that Shay's saying like the doctor didn't have good conclusions based on things that I've said, which is how all diagnosis is done, is what you told me, right? So I think Shay's saying, no, you misunderstood some of the things I said, or some of it came out wrong. You landed on the wrong diagnosis. The psychiatrists are stereotypically fickle and not really going to sit with you for an hour and labor over this. Like they tend to just jot it down. And so like I can see where the psychiatrist. So okay, couple of feedback pieces here.
Okay.
First, I think that one thing all listeners need to at least hear me say, and we've talked about this in the past, diagnosis is not as powerful as we sometimes think it is. There are situations where it is, okay, and it does sometimes really matter. And Shay is talking about my medical file is now skewed. And my first reaction to that is, oh, Shay, don't worry. Come on. Diagnosis is usually just a billing code. It's not that big of a deal. It's whatever this person wrote down so that they could bill for the time that they saw you, charge the insurance, and then ultimately be your partner and help you. If they change that diagnosis in the future, it's not a big deal. Don't think about it as this forever stamp. I want to say that because that's usually true, is that you shouldn't overthink that. Okay, people think of diagnosis as this scar, like you've now been somebody from on high has stamped a thing on your forehead. That is not usually the case. However, if you're in the military,
that's the example I was thinking.
Then
if you're military, if you're government, if you're some school jobs, some teaching jobs, require disclosure of medical records, especially like private schools and that nature of things.
Yeah.
Really?
So like recently I had a patient who is trying to recruit into the Air Force. Okay? So they want to enlist. And they decided to come see me despite what the recruiter told them. And the recruiter warned them and said, have you seen a therapist in the last 2 to 3 years? And the person's like, yes, I have. And they were like, okay, then you're not eligible to join the Air Force. And they were like, hey, that's stupid. And when the patient told me that, I was like, hey, Air Force, that's the dumbest effing thing I've ever heard of. And I'm sure that's not the real policy. I'm sure that's just the person's impression. Because if that's the real policy, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my life.
Because that could be marriage counseling.
It could be marriage counseling. And also, you don't want your soldiers to be comfortable talking to a therapist and working out their stuff. So I have had situations where I had one young patient. I had seen him as a young man, and then at 18 he wanted to enlist in the Army. And he had revealed to them, yep, I've worked with Jim before. And they said, in his case, they said, okay, great, get us a letter from Jim that basically surmises your diagnosis and gives us a feel for what that was all about. And I was happy to write that, and I know what they're looking for. I mean, and that's fair. Like, I don't want them to discriminate on mental health grounds, but, like, it's fair. Like, if you tell me, I saw a psychiatrist, what for? Psychosis and homicidal ideation.
Right.
Okay, don't give you an assault rifle right now. Like, that's not good for you, and that's probably a bad fit, right? And so you're allowed to consider that, but it pisses me off that there's situations that a person would be made to be afraid. Like, Shay's afraid of this diagnosis scarring Shay's life, and, like, I don't want that to be the case. I don't even think it usually is. But in very rare circumstances, such as the military, I understand that is a problem.
Mm-hmm. That was always an issue, too, whenever I was working with kids, like in foster care. Like, because they wanted to, as soon as they were out of high school, they wanted to join the military. But, like, you got to be careful with, like, a diagnosis, and especially what medications, like what medications are prescribed, has an effect on whether or not they can get in.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's tricky too because a lot of people believe that there's some kind of master file in the sky where like all of your medical data forever has always been kept, and like as soon as you apply for a government job or something, they can tap into that like a credit report and just see it. That's not true. That doesn't exist. Like in my practice, I have your file. It's an envelope. It's a folder. I have it. It's paper. Nobody else has that. You know, and other therapists, there's no master cloud where we upload all this crap. But what can happen is if they know who your therapist is, they can request the records and ask you to sign off on that. If you decline to sign off on that, they could take you to court and, you know, force it sometimes, but that's pretty rare too. But my point is, the entire healthcare system and confidentiality law is built so that a person should not fear a diagnosis. And I still believe that diagnoses are not as powerful as people are often led to believe. And so my first thoughts to Shay is, unless there's more to this story that's specifically, you know, like you were up for a job and like this is getting in the way or something like that because they actually have access to your healthcare records, which is very unusual. Usually you have to sign your life away to the government to be in that kind of a position. I don't think this diagnosis is going to matter very much. And I think that if you disagree with it, go get a second opinion. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I have that all the time. I have patients that come to me and go, and I'll say, oh, have you worked with other therapists? Yeah, I have. Why'd you come to me? Why are we not continuing with the other person? Oh, they think I'm an alcoholic, and I'm not. I'm really just depressed. And like, okay. And then like I'll screen them and I'll realize, yeah, the person's definitely consuming a lot of alcohol to deal with their depression. But they're pre-contemplative about that part of the problem, but they're completely, you know, in action stage about the depression. Let's deal with the depression. Yeah. And they'll say, Jim, are you diagnosed me as an alcoholic? Oh, there is no such diagnosis as an alcoholic. Don't worry about it. Let's deal with your depression. Like, let's just deal with all of this, right? Because labels get in the way, in my opinion. But I don't know.
Yeah. I would want, I don't know. I'm really interested in kind of figuring out, like, getting some more information as far as, like, how this is impacting life currently and what's going on with that.
If it's not, Shay, I would discourage you from building it up too much. And I realize it's really frustrating. And that's another thing, is like going to a psychiatrist and be like, hey, I want you to change my diagnosis. Part of me understands why they can't do that, because they filed the paperwork, right? And so it's medical fraud if they call back the insurance and go, just kidding, you know, I billed you for, you know, F40.1 and I've changed my mind at the patient's request. You know, like, it also they don't do that because it doesn't super duper matter usually. And it's not as written in stone as the patient may perceive. And so they're like, it's not worth the effort for them to do that. And also, no, based on the data you gave me at the time, I rendered a diagnosis and filed for billing. So yeah, that happened. If I learn more as time goes on, then yeah, I change my diagnosis. That happens all the time. The diagnostic system is an evolving process. Those change.
Well, it's also interesting because a lot of the diagnoses are going to change throughout treatment anyway.
Yeah.
Because you will stop meeting
you won't meet criteria.
Yeah, if therapy is working and going well,
right?
Yeah, you stop meeting a lot of those criteria.
Yeah, and you learn as you go.
Right.
I mean, you know, you have a preliminary diagnosis. Like, let's say somebody presents with anxiety and depression on day one. It could be bipolar disorder, right, or it could be major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. I'm not going to know until I get more understanding of you and see you throughout a cycle, right? I need to get a feel for you. And I'll ask, you ever have mania? I don't know what that means, but sometimes I feel up for a couple of days. Okay, we don't have good clarity on this. I'm going to learn more. Right. So, like, I'll study the person, and then my diagnoses are going to change based on the human, right? And so when I do interact with insurance, yeah, my diagnostics change according to what's going on with the person. I don't go back and change the old file because A, altering medical records is generally frowned upon once they've been submitted. That's not a good idea. And B, no, that legitimately represented my concept at the time, which is absolutely valuable data. If you were to go back through my file, you're watching the journey of the clinician learning the patient, and my first thoughts were based on this, and my new thoughts are based on that, and that's okay. But again, I follow Nick's point. If this is actually causing a barrier in your life, obviously it's a lot more high stakes. And I think the only way out of it is just to go to that second psychiatrist and get a new diagnosis.
Yeah. And depending on what the diagnosis is, it would be interesting to know what the specifiers are for that diagnosis too. Because like for, you know, my work with substance use disorder, most of all of my clients, by the time that they're done with treatment, there's a specifier that goes behind that diagnosis,
right,
which is in sustained full remission.
Remission.
So, I mean, that kind of changes that diagnosis a little bit with those specifiers.
Yeah, and depression has that too.
Yeah.
And so over time, like, you'll start, I mean, after you've been treating a patient for depression for a few months, you might start adding the specifier in remission. and I've submitted billing on that, and insurances generally, in my experience, are fine with it. They're like, no, that's fine. We would rather it be in remission.
Right.
That's cool. So I don't know, but Shay, I like the question because I think it brings to the forefront the power diagnoses can have. It's one of the reasons there's a lot of therapists now that are, it's one more of the reasons we talked in the last show about, why mental health providers are generally not talking to insurances in droves. And this is actually one of the additional reasons. For me, I don't care that much, but there's a lot of therapists that will say the reason they are not working with insurance is because insurance requires the rendering of a diagnosis, and that doesn't feel completely on the level. Like, if I meet somebody for the very first time, how can you force me to render a diagnosis? Like, what if I just honestly don't see anything? Should I deny them treatment? Should I continue treatment and continue to look and see if there's more there to treat? If they have presenting problems, don't they deserve care? Does it have to fit in a box?
Well, and this is where a lot of therapists will also make a diagnosis of ruling out, that they're going to rule something out. But I don't know if insurance would bill for that.
No. They need a diagnosis and a CB2 code.
Yeah.
And even diagnoses, they'll only pay for certain ones. And that becomes a problem too. Oh, God, if you really want to get in the weeds, there is an entire debate and deep discussion going on in the clinical community about the concept of fraud. And basically, if Nick is my patient and Nick presents with, let me pick something really generic here. Let's say he presents with nervousness and like he seems anxious, but it doesn't quite meet criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, right? But he's here saying, I want to get ahead of it. I listened to this great podcast that's tolerable and has a lot of bro jokes in the beginning, but generally gets down to business. And they were like, go see a therapist, get ahead of the problem. So I'm here to get ahead of the problem. So I might look at him and go, okay, if I write down generalized anxiety disorder on this diagnostic code and bill his insurance, somebody could accuse me of fraud. They could say, Jim, did he really meet it? And like a hand to a Bible, no. But the patient deserves care. The patient pays for this insurance. It should be used, and this is appropriate. And I should be the one to treat him, and it's okay to do this. So the insurance companies have forced me into a no-win position where I have to basically put words on a paper that renders a diagnosis so that the patient can have care, even though by the letter of the law they didn't meet all the criteria on that particular bubble sheet. And it's a big debate inside the clinical community where clinicians are like, yeah, I have no problem with that. I'm just going to write the words because this patient needs help and I'm preventing generalized anxiety disorder. And it's okay to do that. Who's the insurance to question my clinical logic? If I don't think the patient should be treated, I will tell the patient, I don't think you need a therapist. And that's my call. The insurance is not a licensed clinician. They are a financial entity. So I don't care what they think. I'm going to treat. And if this is what they require, then I'm going to bubble in the stupid thing so that I can treat the patient. But then there's another, debate in the community that's like, well, don't do that because like that's unethical, right? Because like you're misrepresenting data and like and then it's like, well, we're forced to misrepresent data. We don't have a choice. We didn't build the system. We got to treat people.
And that's why it would be great if you could use the diagnostic code to rule out generalized anxiety disorder.
But they don't care.
Exactly.
They want there to be
but then you're not going to get reimbursed for it. You're just going to be doing free services.
And there's a bunch of diagnoses that the insurance will not pay for. And so you'll look at like, and this happens sometimes in my online format is I'll like search for a diagnosis and I'll be like, oh, this one seems right. And I'll click it. And then the thing will be like, this is a non-reimbursable item. You should probably select one that's reimbursable, but we can't tell you what to do. And I'll be like, okay, thanks for the information. That's interesting. So that's why I'm usually on team don't take insurance because my life becomes extremely simple. I just treat my patient. Yeah. They're my boss. I don't have to worry about anybody else's opinion, and they don't necessarily want a diagnosis, and I don't necessarily have to give one. Let's fix the problems that are in your life. But Shay, definitely love that you're not giving up on this process. Definitely hear your discouragement about it. Obviously a lot of questions about the extras. Yeah. But go for that second opinion. Reveal to the second psychiatrist, I'm here because I didn't agree with the first diagnosis. I don't feel that the clinician got to know me. And I think that they rendered it, in a hasty way. And
to that point, because there is no master cloud where everything floats and you have this magical medical record up there, if you go and you get a second opinion and somebody, the government who you're applying for a job with later on decides, well, we need these medical records, okay.
Give them the second
Point
guy.
them to this guy.
Yeah.
who gave me this diagnosis.
Shay, you can. This is fine, by the way. This is completely fine. You could literally go to the second psychiatrist, never even tell them about the first psychiatrist, and just say, "Hi, I'm a new patient establishing care, and I'm here to deal with X, Y, and Z." And then they will go, "Great, that sounds like this diagnosis." And you'll go, "Great, that's pretty much what I thought it was." And they'll go, "Great," and then they'll write it all down. And then later on, if you're applying for a government job and they're like, "Hey, we need those medical records," you can go, "Great, let me send you to Dr. B because Dr. B has my records." And you're done. You don't even have to reveal the existence of Dr. A, unless, of course, the government puts like a lie detector on you and says, this is fraud if you don't, or not fraud, but perjury if you don't reveal 100% of all the providers in history.
Right.
Then I guess that's a problem. Good luck with that, Shay.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I didn't build the system. Anyway, but don't sweat about it. Go get that second opinion. That'll probably work it all out. Anyway, we are at the end of our show. We want to say thank you to all the folks that continue to put up with us. God bless you people.
Yeah. And we got a new THERAPAL this week. Thank you, Matthew Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and way to use your real name.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that doesn't sound made up at all.
Matthew Johnson.
Not like
Jacob Smith. Yeah. It's the most undercover name I've ever heard.
Someday we're going to learn his real name.
Yeah, I bet you he's a plant.
I'm a ficus.
That's exactly it. Oh, my God. Well, welcome to the party, and we especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the THERAPRODUCERS. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Ellie O'Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, and ex officio board members, Crazy Banana Scoop, and Gray Whitaker.
If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous bro side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy. And thank you for supporting mental health.
They're called projects. That's all the time we got for this session. Thank God. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast. And thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something that you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it. You can open up the episode subscription in your podcast app and just copy and paste that link we provided. It'll work on any system. Don't forget you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
If you want to submit a question to the show, ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Isosceles.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.